Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scary Bad Reviews, and this is my intro.
That was legitness.
Alright, so it is December 10th. We are in the middle of the festive season. We have got a Christmas movie review later on, but the main portion of this episode I wanted to bring up that we have a special guest today. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Nick.
So Nick is also a horror movie nut, and so I get to kind of focus a lot more on horror movies in general rather than some of the other stuff that I've been talking about recently. So to kick off this episode, I wanted to dive into some movie news that's come out recently. We finally have a 2020 release date set for Jordan Peele's version of Candyman, after they've also announced that he is redoing Twilight Zone. And I'm really excited to see where his psychological aspect of this slasher can go.
I am absolutely thrilled. I saw the Candyman when it first came out in the theaters and absolutely loved it. I love that there was such a creepy character in this urban setting with the bees, and it can only get better being remade.
Yeah, I think that, out of that one, it was definitely in the later part of the slasher wave of the 80s, and so I feel like it gets forgotten because there wasn't much to the story that makes you remember it, but I think for a lot of horror movie fans, they remember the design of it because the hook, just his performance with his deep voice, just kind of, it's a borderline, you hate to use the word charisma for a villain in a horror movie, but it's a borderline charismatic performance that just keeps drawing in your attention.
I completely agree. Not only that, but the soundtrack was fantastic. To this day, I still listen to that kind of piano instrumental piece that seems to accompany whenever Helen is walking around. And also, just like you said, the charisma that the character had, that actor is kind of in so many B horror flicks, and you always say, oh yeah, there's the Candyman right there.
So it'll be interesting to see where he takes that, also in a psychological aspect, because his whole focus has always been to just kind of mess with your head, and they did that a little bit in the original slasher, but it was still kind of focused on, a little bit of the gore, a little bit of the goofy storyline to go with what was coming out at the time. So I think it'll definitely mess with our heads a little bit more than the original one did back in the 80s.
Absolutely, I think so. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing.
So another reboot that got announced for the next couple years is James Wan, who has been the head of the Conjuring universe, Aquaman, the last two Fast and Furious movies, has been assigned to redo Resident Evil a year and a half after the first try of it ended. They had, I believe, either 4 or 5 Resident Evil movies in the modern run. The first one got a lot of praise from horror fans, and after that it just kept dropping off because they felt there was no need to keep making them. And now we're going to see, it's been done for about a year and a half, and within the next 2 years we're going to see it completely remade again. I love James Wan. I love everything that he does. I think that he was super smart in setting up The Conjuring how he did, but there's no reason to remake this in my mind, even with him.
I don't know. I saw the first one and thought it was good. Literally don't remember anything about the second one. They got pretty bad pretty quick. I think remakes happen too often and too soon, but if anyone is going to bring this back in a positive way that people will remember and not just for sucking, it would be James Wan.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are really they push for reboots, especially of video game movies, because a lot of the original video game movies that came out in the early 2000s, CG was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything that they tried to do to make it resemble the video game just was bad. Like the Resident Evil, a lot of people were disappointed in. Silent Hill, people were iffy about. You had Doom, you had all kind of stuff that while they wanted to make it look like the video game, they just ended up making a really bad movie.
Yeah, and there was that other one that they did where it was a zombie movie. They were on an island, like a party island, and it was bad. There would be kind of flash outs where it would actually show a kill scene from the video game back and forth, and it was dreadful.
Oh. But we'll see where that goes. Like I said, I love everything that James Wan does, and everything that's tied to the Conjuring universe has been successful. I can't wait to see what he does with Aquaman. And you're right in that it's the best name to tag to something if you want it to be successful coming back around, but I just don't think they have to wait even longer, because this is literally not even 2 years out of ending the first run of the franchise. So that would be like making a Captain America series, waiting 2 years and then just remaking the character.
No, it's definitely too soon, but I think they're trying to strike while he's still hot and he hasn't really had any failures, hence this might be his failure.
That is true. He really hasn't had anything go wrong. Another thing that I saw is Ryan Reynolds, who now is set for, they just had Once Upon a Deadpool, which was a version of Deadpool that was PG-13 released for the holidays. He has Detective Pikachu coming in May, which looks awesome. He now is going to be producing, and I believe starring in, a horror movie originated from a story off of Reddit. And I believe the title of it was long as hell. It was The Patient Who Made Me Quit Medicine or something like that. And it's about a doctor in a hospital who's dealing with a mental illness patient who ends up starting to like either hunt him or drive him crazy or something. I thought this was absolutely insane because it may work with him being at the helm of it, it may work with other people, but I don't understand pulling a story off of Reddit just that someone wrote directly. Like, wait until maybe it's been fleshed out into a book, maybe until someone's made a video of it. A 3-page story off of the internet is not enough fodder for a movie.
I think times have changed and it's not so much about quality. I think it's just there's an idea out there. Let's grab it up and make a movie and throw a name on it, and here we go. It's the reality of what movies are now.
And apparently there was a huge bidding war for it too. Like in the story that I found, they bought the rights to this story for like $50 million from whoever wrote it. Like, and there were 3 other production companies that were trying to vie for this story.
See, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it makes sense in the way that, again, everything needs to be fast and quick, and someone wrote this story, that looks like something we can throw a little bit more of a plot onto and put a big name actor on it. Yeah. And honestly, it really sounds like a glorified What About Bob, which could be hilarious.
That's true. That is true. It could end up going that way, and it's funny that I brought up a Reddit-originated story in a horror movie, because we'll get to that later when we get to tear apart another Reddit-originated horror movie. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that kind of wraps it up for movie news. We got a couple of trailers near the end of the week, but we'll kind of wait until a little bit more of the details fleshed out in that. We're supposed to get an Avengers trailer, another Godzilla trailer, and everything, but kind of switching gears here, I wanted to get into an actual discussion. There was and this is perfect topic for this, there was a psychology study done, and I believe it was University of New York, and they said that there's a direct interaction between horror fans in dealing with their anxiety and watching horror movies. The study quoted that multiple patients with clinical anxieties enjoyed watching horror movies, and they detailed kind of the idea was that with your anxieties, you fear that you can't control what's happening to you, you fear you can't control what you're doing and what other people are doing around you and how the situation is going to go. And in horror movies, you already know what's going to happen. There is sort of a control over the situation within the movie, and it kind of just blurs away what they're worried about in real life. I kind of understand where they're going with it, and I think it kind of does apply, but how do you feel about that? Because I don't know.
I get it. As someone who has just anxiety and those type of problems, I'm also someone that goes to bed every night either watching Snapped or Criminal Minds or a horror movie, and people think I'm nuts that, oh, well, you have anxiety, but you're going to bed watching people being murdered.
Right.
And it is calming in a certain sense, almost because this horrible situation is not happening to you, or it's so outlandish it could not happen to you, and it makes you feel comforted, sort of, to see, oh, someone else has got real problems. This murderer is chasing them through the woods.
Yeah, and I think that it does kind of boil down to the autonomy of the situation and having control over the situation. Yeah. Because, a lot of it does come from you have these crazy ideas in your head of situations that you won't be able to do anything about.
Right.
And in the movie, a lot of times horror movies are super predictable. So you don't necessarily have control over the situation, but you know where it's going to go.
Right.
And so there's nothing to worry about when you watch them.
Right, and there's a beginning and there's an end. Granted, they have the ones that kind of drag on and, here comes the sequel, but there is finality to it. They got the bad guy or he lives on, but it ends. And
yeah, there's no worrying about the resolution of something.
Yeah.
There's no worrying about what you're going to do about something because
Exactly.
it's going to end in itself.
And it's, dates back to when they did plays back in, Shakespearean times. It's to entertain you and take your mind off of your own crap, truly. Yeah. I don't know if horror makes that easier, and that's why this study found it to be that way, but for me, definitely. I would much rather sit down and watch a slasher film than a love story to get away from it.
Yeah, so I had seen that, and I read into it a little further, and it just kind of blew my mind, but it does definitely make sense when you sit down and think about it. And one thing that you mentioned that I also wanted to bring up was talking about watching, like, Criminal Minds. There's definitely an association with elements of horror movies being incorporated into crime television.
Absolutely.
Like, with Criminal Minds, with NCIS, with CSI, like, all of them. It's hilarious to me that there are people who say that they won't sit down and watch a horror movie because of the gore, because of the violence, because of the sex, nudity, vulgarity, whatever you want to say. But they will sit down and watch those crime shows for hours on end, and it's like they don't realize it, but it's the exact same thing.
It's diet horror movie.
Pretty
it's
much.
Vanilla, and that's what it is. They're able to watch it during safe hours of TV time, so it's they can get away with it, but it is the same. They play. I'm surprised there isn't more lawsuits. How much things are similar.
Like, watching through Criminal Minds right now, like, there is so much. There have been multiple episodes with multiple different unsubs that, like, it's exactly pulled from horror movies, and a lot of their inspiration, it does feel like, comes directly from the movies. And it's funny to me that people try to differentiate between the two just because one of them is focusing a little bit more on, the good guys trying to catch the bad guy rather than someone trying to survive. Like, it just feels like there's other connotations around everything just because of where the focus is on, like, in the episode of the show. And I don't think that that's fair to horror movies because, like, I don't think a lot of those people understand that there are horror movies that work similarly that, people just won't accept.
No, and they're not going to. A large portion of the population is just not comfortable with the fact that we like things that are a little violent. People have a discomfort with that, but they can kind of pretend like they're not in the same position of liking it because they watch, Criminal Minds.
Yeah.
So, okay, you watch Criminal Minds. You don't like horror movies, but you kind of do.
Yeah, they're pretty much the same thing. But
Yeah.
I just always found that kind of interesting, and it's definitely, the later I've gotten into watching Criminal Minds, the more it's kind of shown itself, and that, a lot of them aren't that different from each other.
No, they're not at all. They're not at all.
So, to kind of close out the discussion, we're going to enter into a full-scale review of an absolutely horrible movie that both of us took the time out of our days to sit down and watch. And
Time we can never get back, mind you.
And both of us actually spent money to see this movie, too.
That's true as well.
Our full review for today is another Reddit-originated horror movie. You could even say it was pre-Reddit because it was from Creepypasta. It's the Slenderman movie that came out, I believe it was late 2017.
Ooh.
Oh, this movie was horrible. This movie was just absolutely terrible. I wish, for the love of God, that someone would give me back the $4 that I spent to watch it. It was just, it had so much potential, and it was just an absolute disaster. I gave the movie a 2.5 out of 10. I think that the only thing that it does right is it follows the actual lore of Slenderman pretty closely, according to the original story from the books, from the video game. They try their best to kind of follow the lore of him as a character, but everything else in it is terrible. The acting, the special effects, the plot that they wrote, the chemistry between everybody, it's just bad.
I'll give it a solid 3 just because I'm not as angry about the acting as you are. That being said, I was so hopeful for this movie. They had everything at their fingertips, and they basically just squatted over top of it and took a dump. It was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Again, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know where to begin. There was different points where I felt like the movie could possibly shape up, and then it was just weird. It was like the writing, they didn't know what to do, so they just kept trying to scare you with, oh, here's the girl that's now gone blind. And it's like, that's just strange. This whole thing's just strange, and the end was stupid. It was stupid.
Yeah. So, the acting in it was horrible, as it was all. It seemed like all of the actors in this were like children's television show actors who were trying to make the jump out of children's television.
Yeah.
Felt like a lot of post-Disney, post-Nickelodeon stars in the movie, so they already aren't that great of actors, and then trying to give them a script where a lot of the focus is on them holding tension and them interacting with each other did not work at all.
It was very uncomfortable.
The whole
they
movie,
seemed uncomfortable.
The whole movie.
Yeah.
And, it just seemed like it seemed out of place to setting it in a high school worked for the plot of the movie, because Slenderman kind of interacts with a lot of teenagers in his story, but like everything, all of the acting seemed super forced. It seemed like they didn't, like you said, they didn't feel comfortable with anything happening in the movie. It definitely feels like there were points where they weren't sure how to convey certain lines and certain parts of the script.
The relationships were odd, too. It's like they wanted to create these characters that you care about. I didn't care about any of them at all.
No.
And they didn't seem to really care about each other.
Not at all.
It was so bad.
On top of that, the plot is all over the place. I get the introduction of Slenderman and that he's kind of a mysterious figure and that you don't know where he is, you don't know what he's going to do, you don't know what he wants. But just this all of a sudden decision, hey, let's go on the internet and try to find this demonic entity for no good reason because we're just four girls at a sleepover. Like, what's the point?
No,
Like,
there was no point to it all. And the only thing that I think possibly acting-wise could have saved them was the girl with the red hair who was previously an Oculus. I was so excited when I saw her, and then she was gone.
Yeah, she's the first one gone.
Right. So I was like, okay, well, this is gone from bad to worse. Here we go.
And just kind of as it goes on, the timing that they chose for these girls to have these encounters with Slenderman was awful. The actual encounters themselves, that plays into how bad the CG was and how bad the effects were to try to make...
The effects didn't offend me too much.
But the effects, to me, most of the effects in it just seemed like they were doing a really poor job of making a fever dream psychological. Like, they just wanted it to be like just a bunch of images flashing at you, you to be super confused, not know what's happening, and it was kind of supposed to be that uncomfortable feeling that you get from just being shocked by what's being presented to you, and it didn't work because it's like, for that to happen you have to have some sort of understanding of what images you're being shown, and that it's just showing random shit that doesn't make any sense within anything. Like, it's showing nothing that relates back to the plot line. It's just showing these random images of different people being attacked by different things, and it doesn't scare you. It just
it was just confusing. I think it was like an attempt at sensory overload. It was like they were trying to do The Ring, remember, flashing those images, but like you said with Samara, those made sense. No, okay. You know what, though? I also stopped paying attention to things like that. I just started, now I'm looking at the wall. Now what am I going to have for lunch? This started to happen during the movie.
Oh, yeah, I did not watch the middle 30 minutes of this movie.
Oh, Jesus.
The movie is an hour and 45 minutes long, and the middle 30 minutes I did not watch. I went and made myself food and then came back and just played on my phone. I couldn't do it.
See, then I should be angrier than you because I watched all of it. I just kind of zoned out at different points.
They don't even know how to properly end the movie either.
Yeah, that was a slap in the face too. They ended it and
just with everybody disappearing. They're like, oh yeah, all four of them are gone. One of them had to make some form of sacrifice and just casually did. There's like no end struggle. She just accepts it.
She accepted it, but then attempted to run away from it, and that pissed me off too. You just gave yourself to the Slenderman and then said, "Oh no!" And
you're like, "Oh man, I'm gonna trick him." Oh man, this guy has just kidnapped all of my friends. He's kidnapped thousands of children. He's present everywhere, but I can run away from him.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, I don't know why they tried to put that little 180 in there at the end, but that just made me even more mad.
Yeah.
And the whole little ending of like the sister who she sacrificed herself for being like, I'm still looking, I'm still gonna find them.
Yeah.
Like, oh god damn it.
They opened the door to have a shitty sequel. That was the point of that, which is awesome.
And they're not going to.
Well, good.
Like, the studio already shut it down because of how bad the movie was. I think it's sitting at like a 38 on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's higher than it honestly should be. But there was almost nothing that they did in this movie right, and it took a lot of energy to sit and even try to finish, and I didn't even properly finish it.
It did. It was not a fun time.
God damn it.
You live and you learn.
It's always hit or miss, especially with internet movies, but Yep, I gave it a 2.5. You were a little bit kinder and gave it a 3.
I'm giving it a 3, but the more we talk, the
lower you want to bring it. I always give movies at least a 1 because they're successfully made in Hollywood. They spent money, they made a movie. I usually don't like to give movies a 10 because I think that there's always at least a little bit that movies can fix. So, but with how bad this was and them only doing one thing kind of right, I couldn't give it any higher than a 2.5.
That's fine. I'm fine with that. I'm good with that.
So to completely switch gears from a bad movie to a good movie, and in light of the holidays, I wanted to bring up Home Alone, which is an instant classic.
Yes.
Meanwhile, this chair absolutely just farted at me. But Home Alone is, of course, one of the most classic Christmas movies there is, and I sat down and watched it earlier this week, and I'm not even looking to fully review it. I just want to say that I have a personal love for it because I don't think there were any other movies that kind of fit like it, with this back third of the movie where he's setting up the traps in the house and they're trying to break in. Like, whoever was the creative team to think of the traps that he set in the house and then allowing the two burglars to just interact with it and just kind of give natural reactions and for them to play off of each other, the back third of this movie is just perfect.
It's nothing but comedy. You can watch it at any age, and it is timeless. I just put it on for my daughter for the first time this season, and she was laughing hysterically the entire time. And it catches your attention right from the start. You don't have to wait for the last third of it. It's amazing. The only down I have about Home Alone and Home Alone 2 is that I cannot watch those movies without wanting to order a pizza.
That is true. A delicious cheese pizza.
A delicious
just
cheese
for
pizza,
me.
all for myself.
And I think that this is one of the few movies that captures it, and that when you watch the first one, you have to watch the second
Absolutely.
one. Within the next 48 hours, if you don't watch the second one, your brain just kind of starts ticking. Like,
Yeah,
it's
you're
like,
just
I need
picturing
to
it in your
see
head.
it.
You're mentally watching it anyway.
And personally, I think I like the second one a little bit better than the first one.
Yeah, I do
just
too.
because I think the second one is a little bit goofier, and he has more room to be kind of crazy with the traps he sets in New York. But there's also this hilarious internet rumor that I wanted to talk to you about because someone tried to put together this awful fan theory that proves that Kevin McAllister grows up to become Jigsaw. They put all these facts together about Jigsaw's past along with Kevin's likeliness to set up the traps and his enjoyment of seeing the burglars get hit by the traps and the pain that they show in it. And it was probably one of the worst things I've ever sat and completely read through.
Who has the time to even think of that?
You don't want to ask that question, because trust me, everyone on the internet has all the time in the world. I just don't know, what good does it do you to make that fan theory?
I mean, we're talking about it now.
I mean, we are. But it just blew my mind. But
that is so disturbing.
Oh man, but I can understand a little bit of a connection because it's like not many movies had been just someone laying traps and then watching people interact with them. I can understand that aspect of it, but what the hell are you thinking?
No, someone was shroomed out just sitting there watching Home Alone.
And they're like, oh man,
that is Jigsaw right there.
That's him. He did it. But I love watching Home Alone. I love watching both of them.
Yeah.
Do not get me started on anything past Home Alone 2.
I don't acknowledge that it
all
happens.
the rest of them are terrible. Home Alone 3 is kind of on the fence a little bit. I watched it a couple times as a child. I'd go back and watch it again just to make sure. But the first two are just untouchable.
Yes.
And I just love being able to watch them around Christmas every single year. And I don't think I've ever... And as a huge horror fan, this is pretty funny because of all the different grisly stuff we've seen. I don't think I've ever squirmed so bad in a movie as when Marv steps on the nail in that in the first
terrible.
one. When both of his socks and shoes come off and he just sticks that nail about an inch deep in his foot. I don't know if I've ever just cringed and just balled up in
clench everything.
Oh my gosh, you can just feel it.
Yeah.
And it's out of everything I've ever seen, I've watched the Hostel movies, the Saw movies, Hatchet, all these different kind of craziness things, and that is probably the worst moment that I've ever squirmed at a movie, is just watching that deck nail go an inch into his foot.
That's a bit extreme. But
I'm not kidding.
Clearly, when you were a child, you stepped on a Lego very
No,
hard.
as a child, I stepped on a razor blade.
There it is.
And that's what it is.
And there it is.
That, like, I think I was probably in, like, second or third. No, I was probably a little bit older than that. Maybe 5th or 6th grade. My parents were having a yard sale. So I was going out the garage, out to the yard sale that we had in our driveway. And I didn't even see it at all. Stepped smack on a razor blade, and my foot just would not stop bleeding.
Well, I don't want to. Mm-mm.
But yeah, that's probably it. But
Here it is, yeah. I just diagnosed you. Congratulations.
But, you know, just kind of in the spirit of the holidays, I wanted to bring that up because I watched it the other night, and it's just, I forgot how much fun it is.
It's a gem.
Really.
It's a gem. For me, Home Alone 2, when Marv gets electrocuted, may be the funniest scene in any movie at all.
Oh, I piss my pants every time.
Every single time, screaming like a woman. I've got it to where if the movie is on TV with commercials, I know exactly where to start watching to catch it at that part.
I mean, you have that, you have the paint in that movie, you have dunking his head in the toilet full of kerosene.
Well, and the things they yell at this kid, too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just so horrible. You would never be able to say that to a child in a show anymore.
It please nothing in my heart more than to shoot you.
They throw a brick at him. It's, eat brick, kid!
Well, he throws like 4 bricks at them and connects on 3 of them.
They're classic. Definitely going to watch one of those tonight.
Absolutely. All right, so to close it out, it's the same segment that we always have to close out every single episode. It is the 5 for 5, and what I wanted to do, since we had mentioned a remake before, is movies that we feel need to be remade ASAP. So there's a lot of horror movies that never got their due. There's a lot of them that had bad special effects that we think if they got better, they could be a better movie. And there's also movies that just felt like the writing fell off, the plot fell off, and things like that, that maybe in the new age of movies, we could, you know, do a little better.
Yeah.
So, if you want to start us off with your number 5.
My number 5 is Dolls.
Okay.
Most people have never seen this. It is an awful movie, but I love it. Loved it when I was younger. And it's just these creepy old people that have this old funky house and these dolls. And, you know, dolls run around and kill everybody. But, it's terrible. The dolls look awful, and they kind of talk, and these weird little doll voices. It's awful, but it could be good.
Yeah, it could be a lot better. Just with, like, graphics and, like,
absolutely,
writing
and with actual normal actors. I mean, was done really poorly, but the premise had a lot of potential.
Oh, yeah. My number 5 to start my list off is the Blade series that we got at the beginning of the 2000s.
Yeah.
So, and here's the best part about it is that I don't even want them to change the character off of Wesley Snipes. Like, he stays as Blade.
He was so good.
Just redo everything else around it. You know, now that we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe where it is, you can bring him in because we've had a little bit of the rougher, a little bit more adult stuff in, you know, that universe. Bring him into it, you know, better graphics, better storyline. You can play the edge a little bit more now that we've had Deadpool and we've had Logan and we've had those kind of movies that are superheroes, but they are rated R and they really push that edge that we can go to. I think now would be the time to bring that character back and let him do what he was supposed to do and let the movie be what it was supposed to be. Because I definitely feel like the first 2 in that series felt kind of held back, and then the third one that they made was absolutely horrible because they tried to push the boundary too far.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that with modern CG, with better writing that Marvel has now, and with Wesley Snipes still actively wanting to do it and still advocating for it on Twitter, and with the MCU resetting soon with The Last Avengers, I think now's the time to do it.
I'm for it. I'm all for it. All right, so my number 4 is Sleepwalkers. I don't think this movie was very popular.
No.
But it was one that I still think was very good. The effects, again, not good at all with these, you know, cat people.
Right.
Literally, when they finally showed them, it just looked like a cheap costume from King's Dominion or something. But the story was really good, and like you said, it kind of falls in line with that Criminal Minds theme of there is this family that is going around murdering girls every so many years, so it would appeal to a greater audience right now too.
Yeah.
Whereas back when it came out, early 90s, people wanted these big horror movies,
Yeah.
jumping out of, behind you in your car and stuff like that. This movie wasn't like that. But
Right.
right now, this is what people want.
That is true. People definitely want the focus to not necessarily be on what the villain is or who the villain is, rather than just messing with our heads a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, my number 4, and I think this was present on your list as well, is the Stephen King movie Christine.
Yes.
Because while the original that we have, I believe it was 83 was when the original came out, while it's good and there's definitely you could definitely get the full aspect of the story, nowadays with either going with a modern car or even like a remodeled 70s or 80s car,
Mhm.
the idea that you could even play into it like people being opposed to that person being in love with the car because it's like a gas guzzler or like bad for the environment and stuff like that. There's so much more with cars that we have now that could play into that. It would be awesome. And any of the effects that you want to do with the car driving itself, the car attacking people, would look so much better than what it did.
Yeah. Christine fell at number 1 for me.
Ooh.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
I love that movie, and it's not one that I watch and kind of pick apart as to, if they could only do it now.
Right.
I love it the way that it is. So just seeing how it would be being made in 2020
Yeah.
would be amazing. I think they would have to stick with an older car that someone was told, don't mess around with this piece of junk.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just think about, the scene of the girl choking in the car, what they could do with that right now.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the things that we've gotten with imagery with cars from the Transformers movies. And while I
Right.
don't like those movies very much, that's the example that's set for what we could do in that kind of realm.
Yeah, it would be amazing. It has to get redone, and soon. Where are we at? My number 3 is Candyman. I
There
did
you
not
go.
realize they were doing Candyman, so I'm getting what I want for once. Awesome.
There you go. My number 3 on this list is actually a little bit of a recency bias, and it's Green Lantern, because of how bad the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern was that we got, and now with Wonder Woman and with Aquaman coming out, DC is finally turning themselves around past the mistakes of Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, and even a little bit of the mistakes with Justice League, and I think they're kind of picking up where they should go. And for this movie was just terrible. With the CG in it was terrible, the story was terrible, the acting was terrible. And now that they finally have their own universe, they have better writers, they have better directors, and they have a direction that they want to go in. Why not give it another chance?
I'm fine. It's like when you go to a restaurant, you order something that's not good. I'm fine. I'm just not going to order it again. You
Yeah.
know. But I get it.
So.
I'll wait for you to review it and then I'll watch it. All right, my number 2 would be Return of the Living Dead. I think this movie was so just 80s fabulous.
Absolutely.
That if they did it now with these millennials and how they act, oh my gosh. The only requirement I would have would that the Tar Man has to be in it in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, I see that movie and I see just 80s trash.
Yeah.
It is perfect. So it's got to be redone.
And there's a lot of different directions. You could go with pure millennials, you could go with hipsters, you could go with underground, you could go with all these different kinds of sects of society that we have now.
Yep.
That definitely could work pretty well, because I love that movie too, just because it's like, okay, zombie movies feel a little stagnant. What should we do? It's like, add trash, add punk underground garbage, and that's what you needed.
Right. It's perfect.
My number 2 on my list is, it possibly is happening. They've had talks and rumors of it for the past 2 years, and it's Spawn. Spawn was the late 90s attempt at Image Comics, which is a third-party comic industry, at their attempt of making the movie. And the 90s version, I love it, but it's horrible. Like, all of the effects in it are terrible. All the acting in it is terrible. You don't want the story to keep going. And for a character that's so enigmatic, a character that has just immense power that you don't know that much about, and a lot of people don't even know who he is, like, that's what people are looking for right now, because now at this point, we've all heard the origin stories of everyone.
Right.
We've heard the origin story of Spider-Man twice. We've heard Captain America, we've heard Thor, we've heard all of them at this point. And now people are asking, can we make some of the more obscure things, because that'll introduce them and give them an idea of whether they want to go find this comic and go dive deeper into some of the stuff. And so I think, and this one could even get into some of the horror elements that they're kind of trying to balance out with superheroes in certain places, but it was just such a disappointment that this movie looked like it looked like the graphics were done by a calculator. Like, it looks like they took a TI-83 and tried to use a program to do the graphics for them in hell. Like, it looked like a really bad CD-ROM computer game. And it makes me so mad every time I watch it because I love so much of, like, the early part of the movie, and I actually like his design in the movie, as bad as most people think it is, but it could just be done better with CG now, with acting now, with writing now, and everything. So
I agree. I agree with you. I think it deserves to be done better. It deserves another shot, particularly if it's upsetting you this much. And well, we already got my number.
We already
one.
ruined your number.
You
one,
ruined it.
But
Thanks.
you know.
Go, Christine.
So the end of my list, number one, I had The Crow. And here's the thing: is that there's a big frustration with this being number one on my list because this was supposed to happen. About a year ago, both of the production companies that were involved in the original had okayed a full reboot. They had a director pegged, and they had Jason Momoa signed and ready to go
Ooh.
to play the main character. As they were starting to put the pieces together, the two original production companies got into a dispute over who holds majority rights to the original. Lawsuit occurs. They don't agree to both do the movie, but both have parts of the rights, so the new production company can't do it without those two being on board.
Great, so it's a stalemate.
So it just all fell apart. We were so close to getting a remake of this movie, which the original is probably, like, if not my first, my second favorite movie of all time.
Yeah.
Like, I absolutely love the original. I love everything about it. I've dressed as the Crow for 2 Halloweens, like, and it's just so, it's like a negative superhero movie. Like, if you take the modern superhero movies and almost like you get a negative of a picture, if you take the negative of those, that's what this was.
Yeah.
And there's horror aspects to it, there's darkness aspects to it, and all that kind of stuff. And so I definitely think that it was a super grungy, super, like, depressing superhero
It's
movie
definitely
that
dark.
just does everything right in it.
Yeah.
And I think it was finally time with better, not even better, like, effects or makeup or anything. Just, you know, let's see it again. Like,
Right.
we've got so much other stuff, and at the time, this wasn't a high-budget movie. Put the money into it. Let's see what we can do with it. And especially with Jason Momoa, who's absolutely just on fire. Everything he touches is going to turn to gold within the next 5 years, because he's kind of taking up as kind of the next wave of action star, especially if Aquaman goes well. Stick him in there, because we're not at his highest point yet.
No, he's got a little ways to go.
We haven't reached the peak yet. While Aquaman is probably going to be really good and he's going to be awesome and get a bunch of movie offers after that, he's not at that peak yet. He still has more room to grow. Once he hits to an attempt at a dramatic performance, like once he gets into a movie that's not focused on the action, it's more focused on the emotion, that's when you know you're like, okay, we're good here.
Right.
Because that's what's happened with other people before, and I think the only person I've seen really escape from that was The Rock. The Rock, within the past 2 years, has kind of said, I'm overdoing the dramatic or the comedic performances. Let me go back into the action realm. But it would have been the perfect time. People would have known his name, but not seen him in a bunch of stuff. Like, and it just made me so furious that they just had a simple-ass dispute to stop the production of what would have been... That movie would have made so much money.
So where it sits now is just...
There's nothing. There's literally nothing. It's been just sitting for a year. I mean, like, it was to the point where Jason Momoa posted a picture of him and the supposed director of the movie on Instagram and said, let's get this thing going. Like...
That's just... Well, you know what, though? Feeling this way, maybe that's going to increase the fan outcry to have this done.
I mean, it might. And there's other movies as well that have been kind of stuck in production hell, and two of the biggest examples are both in the X-Men universe, and that you have now New Mutants. We had a full trailer for it. It was going to be released back in July. That got pushed back another year and a half. And we also have been hinted at a Gambit movie with Channing Tatum playing Gambit for 3 years now.
I
and
forgot
they just
about that completely.
Oh no, they've pushed it back 6 times. 6 times they've moved the release date back because they have writers sign on, writers sign off. Directors come on, directors come off. Producers, actors. They've had everything with that movie go wrong that possibly could. And so I think this is going to be another one of those movies that's just eternally never going to be made. Like, we're just going to hear about it forever and we're never going to get it.
Well, you know, it's absolute bullshit, but at the end of the day, The Crow is not on my list. because I adore that movie so much. I don't want to see it redone. I don't need to see it redone.
Right.
Now, you put Jason Momoa on the screen, I'm watching, and I'm watching for a while. But maybe it's not meant to happen.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, it was that movie was perfection. I can see where it could be a little bit different or changed or just brought up to speed on the world we live in now, but I'm great with it just staying there,
Yeah, don't get me started on those god-awful fucking garbage sequels.
Didn't watch them. I
God.
think I actually walked out of the movie theater for the Second Crow and then never touched them again.
Yeah, I got about 2/3 of the way through the Second Crow, and I actually threw my remote at my TV.
Yeah.
Like, it was just god-awful.
Now, mind you, the first Crow I paid for and saw in the movie theater 3 separate times. And this was within, I want to say, 2 weeks.
I think I have 2 copies of it right now, and I'm buying a special edition third to mark the 100 movie mark in my horror collection, so...
Yeah, so, I mean, you're saying it yourself. You want to see it remade and all this, but
it's
you
probably
truly
just not gonna
treasure...
happen.
No, it's probably not going to happen, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Now he's going to cry, so we should probably go.
Well, that's the wrap of the episode, now that I'm upset that the Crow's not going to be made. But yeah, that is the end of this episode. I wanted to thank Nick for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We'll get back around to kind of popping back into schedule. We've got some time off coming up, so we'll get a lot more Christmas movies, a couple more regular movies. Going to try to crack into the theater and see a couple things coming out, like Aquaman and Bumblebee and this new Grinch that came out. As is always the tradition, please like and subscribe. I'm selfishly, just self-promoting. And thanks for listening.